the message she told me was that, you're being let go because you're white and you're male.
The Walt Disney Company has recently faced charges of racism, bigotry, and corruption. It was recently revealed that there is an anti-white male agenda with Disney's hiring practices, and many people at the company have been let go due to being a particular color or gender. Today, we sit down with a gentleman codenamed Agent Kallus. Agent Kallus is a former high-level access employee who worked for the Walt Disney Company for over 15 years. Before he openly discusses the corruption, deception, and misconduct he personally witnessed at Disney, Kallus begins this interview with background and personal information about himself. And as you will see, this information will become even more relevant as more of his story is revealed throughout the interview. Okay, Agent Kallus, first thing, and we appreciate you coming on. Tell us just about yourself before we get into your experience and your career and post-career and everything that happened at the Walt Disney Company. Tell us what you can about yourself, sir.
I grew up in the Deep South. I come from Irish people that have been here since the beginning of the Civil War. My great grandfathers, his brothers, were here and fought for the Union. Most of them ended up in the South after the war, and my family has been pretty much in the same general area to this day. We're extremely poor people, always have been. Most of the people in my family are still week to week, paycheck to paycheck, just normal country people, hanging out, hunting, fishing, that kind of thing. I was unfortunately born with a couple of serious limitations. I have ADHD and had to go on medication for that when I was a really young kid, and I also have a pretty severe dyslexia. So I tend to, so if you bear with me today, I tend to change words around a lot. There's a lot around in my mind. So I grew up over there or down there and struggled a lot because of the learning disabilities. And then somehow made it through high school and got into college. I was on the 6-year bachelor's plan, and after that I got a job out in Tennessee, working for a computer consulting company, and met my current partner. And there was an opportunity for us to move out to California, and landed my dream job working for the Walt Disney Company.
So how did you come to work at Disney? Tell us how that all kind of came about.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I was, as I said earlier, I was terrible at school. And I was terrible at school, and when I was 13 or 14, I went over to spend the weekend with a friend. His grandfather was visiting from Florida, and his grandfather was actually a maintenance person that worked at Walt Disney. And I was just shocked by this. I was like, "You mean people work for Disney? Like, or do you have to pay them to work there? Like, how do you get a job working at Disney World?" Because to me, being someone living, we had government support. I had hand-me-down clothes. I don't remember ever having a new pair of shoes until I was a teenager and could work and buy them myself. So to me, the idea of even going to Disney World, was an amazing dream that would probably never happen, but also that you could actually go and work there. So I got it in my mind at that time that I wanted to go and find some way to go and work at the Walt Disney Company, and that idea never left me. Basically, it was there the entire time. And then when I ended up in California, I found out that you could go to work you couldn't get a job directly in technology working at the Walt Disney Company in any of the divisions. You had to go to, back then, I don't know if it's still like this, but back then you had to go to work for them as a contractor, working for a third party company. And then after 6 months or a year, if Disney felt like you were a fit, they would hire you on as a full-time employee. And that's what happened with me. I went out there and I was hired by this contracting company, and I started at the Walt Disney Company at Disneyland at their technology division. And I was Nick probably knows what this is, but I was the tape ape for like the first 4 or 5 months. And this is the person that works the night shift and runs around and swaps all the backup tapes on the servers.
Right, yeah.
They had servers all over Disneyland, because back then they had this token ring network, if you remember what that is.
Yeah.
And I would go around and swap out the tapes and run patches on the servers and do all the stuff that you couldn't do in the middle of the day, because all the users were using the systems. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was wonderful to go and be there at night and see all the maintenance and the cleaning and everything. And I made these amazing relationships with people that work there in maintenance and at nighttime. And I was very fortunate that almost a year later, and this was the late 90s, I was offered a position to go to work at what is called Disney Worldwide Services as a salaried employee. And it was more money than I thought I'd ever make in my life. I look back on it now, it wasn't enough. But at the time, as a country boy going out to California and getting to work for Disney, I was like, oh my God, and you're going to pay me that much money?
So Agent Kallus, let me just break in here and ask you this real quick. While you're telling us, you were working, a contract job for them, without saying the specific year, can you tell us around about when this was?
I think I can tell you pretty good. It was around 1998.
Okay. I was about to say, who was the United States president at the time? So yeah, 1998. Perfect. It was a big eye-opening experience for me to get to go and it was a dream come true for me to go and work there. And also, as a Southerner who went to a high school that had like maybe 10 Black people, and I went to a couple, went to a community college and then to a state college and then another state college. And these were all colleges in the South. And there was some minority groups, but it was nothing like what I experienced when I started at Disney. Disney, even back then in the late 90s, had to be one of the most diverse companies in the world, because I remember my first day there. My boss was a female. One of the person that did my job on the day shift was a Latino guy. Disney theme parks and resorts is the division. There, it was already organically one of the most diverse companies in the United States, if not probably the world. If you go out into the world, you'll find there's not as much diversity as there is here in the United States, as a matter of fact. And I've been all over the world working for Disney. I got this job working for Disney Worldwide Services, and it was an entry-level job, but I was hired specifically for this position that supports the CEO's office. So I was not only everything technical support for the CEO and his immediate staff, I was also a technical liaison for the CEO for any questions that he had around how the internet works, or how streaming worked, or how data centers did this or that, or how compression worked. I remember doing all these presentations and having to not really dumb it down, because the CEO at that time was Michael Eisner, he's probably one of the smartest people I've ever known in my life. He's extremely intelligent.
but that's what I did there. The first year, and that's how I ended up working there and having counting my time as a contractor, almost a 18-year career there.
All right, Kallus. Well, tell us a little bit more about your work history there, and your later on into being a full-time employee. All the different things that you did there with Disney, and all the things you got to kind of experience and work on.
Okay, well, the division that I worked for is called Disney Worldwide Services, DWS, and they supply technical and engineering services to all the other business units. What you have to understand about Disney is it's a conglomerate of a whole bunch of different businesses. You have, ESPN, ABC, Walt Disney Studios, Merrimack Studios. It just goes on and on and on.
And this is all on one campus?
No, they're all over the place. Okay. And there's consumer products, there's licensing. So all of these different divisions, they need technical services. In the old days, what they did was every single division would have their own technical arm, if you will. Like they would have their own director or VP of technology, and then that would, they'd have their own data centers, their own networks. So you can imagine how expensive that was. So what DWS was trying to do and did finally do in the end was try to consolidate all of that. It was a good idea. I think it was Michael Eisner that drove that as well. So that's the division I worked for. So I spent the first year and a half as an actual employee working for the CEO's office. And actually, one of my interesting with Bob Iger, I met him several times. And the first time I met him was I was helping him and his assistant move into new offices when he became the president for the Walt Disney Company when he left ABC. Again, I don't have anything on a personal level against Bob Iger. He was always nice and cordial, and everyone that I've ever talked to that's worked with him or around him have only had nice things to say about him. I think we all might question some of the decisions that have been made. As a stockholder, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, and that's one of the things being coached. That's one of the things being coached talk about a lot is just these people that are in the news a lot. We don't know them personally. Personally, they might be awesome, wonderful people to hang out and chit chat with, but it's more the decision making and the things that they do that a lot of us have issues with.
And, going back to your question is, Disney, when I started there, was a wonderful place to work. There was an open door policy everywhere. You were encouraged if you had a better idea, a way to do things better. It didn't matter if you were working in one of the theme parks or the hotels, or if it didn't matter what division you worked in. Across the board, the company, since Walt Disney's time, it's what I was told, everyone was always encouraged to bring their ideas. There was no bad ideas, and it was always taken as an idea and not taken as some kind of insult on the way that things have been done or the way things might be done now compared to then. Another great thing about working there early on, I remember one of my earliest experiences as an employee. I went to a retirement party at Disneyland, and there was this VP of gardening, landscaping, maintenance, or whatever, and this was a very nice Japanese man that had been with the company 35 years, and he was retiring. And I remember going to that and just thinking, wow, 35 years, here. And he was, he told me some great stories. I remember one of the things he told me is that he had something like 500 or 600 hours of vacation time in the bucket, because up until like 2005, they would let you have as many hours as you wanted to accumulate. Now they cut them off. I think it's like 230 or something like that. And if you don't use them, you lose them or whatever. Yeah. But this is the kind of environment that that Disney had, and I believe personally that's why the company was so successful. I think that when you have an environment where everybody feels like they have a future with the company, and everybody's working together as a team, and there's synergy, and no one is afraid to speak up, when there's that whole thing about there's no bad idea. I think that fosters an environment of growth, and I think you can see that in the numbers. You just go look. I always tell my friends when they ask me, I say, when you think about Disney buying Marvel and Star Wars or Lucasfilm and Fox Entertainment, the credit, and the funds to do that were all created in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And it was done by people that were just passionate and in love with the Walt Disney Company. And that was me. I mean, I definitely was huge, and I'm still a huge fan of the Walt Disney Company. And I don't want to, I don't want to say that I'm not, because, just because there's been some productions that I think, and some events that maybe we're not held or done in a way that makes everyone happy. You're never going to make everyone happy. But at the end of the day, it was a great place to work. People were promoted from within the company. There was a rule about, listing jobs. They had to be listed 2 or 3 months on the internal sites before they would even go outside. I did quite well in that environment. After my time as, with the CEO's office, I moved over to data center services and was promoted time and time again until I reached the pinnacle of technical services in that division. I think it's all divisions that but if you're on, Disney does this thing that I don't agree with, and I'm not sure if they still do it anymore. You're either on an administrative path or you're on a technical path. And as far as the professional salaried employees, and if you're on the technical path, it's very hard to jump over to the administrative path and vice versa. And what happened to me is by 2008, I was a principal architect, and there was nowhere for me to go. I mean, my salary and bonus was about even with the director. I'm running, $1 million projects. I have Disney employees, being assigned to work on projects with me. I had a lot of contractors that would come in and work for me. But I wanted to continue moving up at the country at the company. And I was told by my, the director and VP that I worked for immediately, I need to get a master's degree in order to do that. So I spent a couple of my years, nights and weekends, getting a master's degree. And then I started applying for jobs. And this would have been around 2010, 11. And I just wasn't getting anywhere with that. And when I started asking questions about, I applied for this job, I'm obviously qualified for it. I'm actually probably more than qualified for it. I even started applying for jobs that were like manager 2 and manager 3 level jobs, which, basically you'd manage teams of like 3 or 4 people, that kind of thing. I just wasn't getting any traction. And then moving on, moving past that to 2013, 14, I had a boss that I worked for, and he was laid off, and he'd been with the company for almost 20 years. And he was also a white guy. And his last day, I was in his office, and he just looked at me and he said, you should just think about going somewhere else because you're not going to really have a future here. And I didn't want to hear this. This was, I didn't even really want to think about it. And what I did, and I feel sorry about it now, but I just kind of wrote it off in my head. Well, you're losing your job and you're just, you're a disgruntled employee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you don't know what you're talking about.
That's how I felt when I was fired.
Yeah. He, when I look back on it now, he was giving me some good advice. I should have taken that advice. And then fast forward, a couple of years later, the VP of our department was replaced, and they brought in a guy that had worked for a software company. And I'll talk about that in a minute, how for some reason we stopped hiring people from within. But this person was stationed up or lived up in Seattle, and he convinced the CTO that the entire group that I worked in should have to move to Seattle. And so they told us about 6 months out, you should consider moving to Seattle. And I wasn't going to move to Seattle. And then they told us about 3 months out that, you're going to get laid off if you don't find an internal job here in Burbank or somewhere else. And I applied for every job that I could even remotely be qualified for. I applied for jobs that I would have taken a 50% pay cut.
50% pay cut?
50.
Wow.
And
you couldn't even get one of those.
I never got a phone call. I never got an interview, nothing. And this is when it really started hitting me, that I was being, I thought it was something I was doing. But then, of course, the day that I was laid off, there was 10 other guys laid off, and they were all white guys. And, my last day, Disney, my entire career working there, I was told, oh, your last day, you have to go and do this exit interview. And the reason Disney does exit interviews is they want to know why people are leaving the company. They want to make sure that future employees have a better experience. They want to make sure that if you're being laid off, that you understand why you're being laid off and that kind of thing. So
give you all your information on signing up for Cobra insurance.
So I sat down and I wrote out like a couple of pages of things like what we just talked about. And so I wanted to, I'm like, well, if I'm going to get laid off, I might as well, have an exit interview prepared. So I'm walking into this exit interview thinking, I'm probably going to get a director, maybe a VP, at the very least, maybe a manager 3 of HR, and I walk in and there's this kid there, 20 years old. He was an intern 3 months before this. He just got hired. And all he had for me was, you need to sign here so that you get your severance package. And I was like, this is the exit interview? And he's like, well, I guess it is. And so I kind of raised a little bit of hell about that. And he left and came back and said, okay, we're going to make a phone call and you can speak to the VP or whatever. And I had her on the phone for about 10 minutes and we went over some of the stuff that I wrote down. And at the very end of the conversation, she says to me, well, I want you to come away from this knowing that this has nothing to do with you personally. This has nothing to do with your job performance, obviously. I mean, guys, I have a box down in the basement full of rewards. I mean, every kind of a reward. Disney's used to be really good about giving out rewards for accomplishments. I have, I was given long-term incentive stock options in stock for the company. I still had a lot of these incentives when the day that I left. But the message she told me was that, you're being let go because you're white and you're male. And,
wow.
I'm sitting in this cubicle by myself and I'm on this phone conference. And then that was the end of the conversation. And I left, took my ID and turned it in. And that was my last day there.
So you just took us from your arrival in 1998 through somewhere, I'm guessing it sounded like 2014 or 15. 16. Okay. So being there the entire time, and you said something a moment ago about Walt Disney. And, Nick and I, being best friends for over 30 years, even though we don't like each other every day, we're still best friends.
Yeah.
We revered the company as well, growing up with Disney.
Yeah, watched it all the time.
It was a special place. Many people call it the happiest place on earth, right? Throughout the time that you were there, how much reverence would you say that the company had for Walt Disney? Did that change? And how did the company change over the years? Because it certainly sounds like the Disney you first started working for in 1998 became a much different one years later.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe, and this is my opinion, I believe the reason that the company is not growing and is not profitable is because they moved away from some of what I spoke about before. You're talking about an environment where you're hired only after you've proven yourself as a contractor. And then you're indoctrinated into this group of people who absolutely love the Walt Disney Company. And Walt himself, the person, was thought of as a god, the founder. I mean, you could not say anything bad about Walt Disney. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet about him being, not the best person. Let's put it that way in his personal life. But his professional life, he turned a tiny studio in a 1,000-foot bungalow. They still have those bungalows on the studio lots, by the way, that you can go and see. He took the company from that to what it was in the late 90s. Well, not him personally. He was gone way before that. But what it was when I got there was because people kept following his leadership,
vision for the company.
Exactly. And you would, they do this thing on your first day orientation. They call it pixie dusting. And you go in and you learn so many things about the company. It's wonderful. But then at 5 years as a salary employee, you get a whole week of it. So they take an entire week and they send you to different places, theme parks, hotels, just all over the company. You get to meet a lot of the executives and you get to learn a lot about parts of the company that you wouldn't normally be exposed to, because normally you're just kind of siloed in your part of the company. Except for what I did in the division I worked for, we interacted with all the other business units. But most of your business units, like for example, if you were at studios, you pretty much just interacted with studio people, But when I went to the 5-year pixie dusting, I got to meet Dick Cook. And I don't know if you know who Dick Cook was, but he was the president of Walt Disney Studios for a really long time. And he told us this story about how he started at Disney selling churros. And when in 1970, when he was in high school, and then he never left the company. He was a ride operator, and then they helped him pay for college. And this man worked his way from nothing up to the president of Walt Disney Studios. Wow. And that story was not unique. It was the norm. Most of the people that I would talk to that would, when I was in my 20s and these people were in their 30s and 40s and 50s, they had been at the company for 10, 15, 20 years. And in fact, on your ID, for the first 15 years that I worked there, on your employee ID, down in the bottom left corner, it had the year that you started on there. And something happened. Something happened after Bob Iger took over, where for some reason, we were kind of, not in so many words, but it was insinuated, don't talk about how long you've been here. The new VP or the new manager, they don't want to hear about how long you've been here. And then about 2014, they took it off the IDs. So now it's like they don't even want to see it on your ID, right? So it went from something that was celebrated, where they would have these big parties where people would reach their 5-year and get a 5-year reward, or 10-year and get a 10-year reward. Or you can imagine what the party is like when you're like retiring at 35 years, like the gentleman I told you about before. Yeah. I don't even think they do that anymore. They stopped doing it in the division that I worked for. So what happens is, you lose, it's a brain drain, because you have people that are leaving because they feel like they don't have a future. You have people leaving because they feel like they don't have any voice, like their experience doesn't matter. And now with the DEI stuff, you have people leaving because they're afraid to speak up. Let me take you through a scenario. Let's say that you're a production, what's hot right now is Acolyte. So say you're on that production, you're a production assistant.
I'm sorry, sir. Did you just say the Acolyte is hot right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
In conversation. In conversation.
Yeah.
Let's say you're on that set and this happened 15 years ago. I have no doubt that even the lowest level assistant production assistant or PA could walk up to the showrunner or the director and say, hey, this thing is out of canon, or hey, this doesn't make sense with the other scene. There's something out of continuity or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be listening. The whatever is brought up may not be looked at seriously, or there might not be a change made because of it, but that would happen. It happened in my line of work. We were all encouraged to always, be vocal and talk about challenges, and especially if you had a resolution for it. The boss that I had for the last 10 years I was there, he was always, don't come to me with an issue or a challenge unless you have a resolution for it.
Right. Yeah.
Don't waste my time. But the point I'm trying to get to here is what I'm being told now with my friends that still work there, that doesn't happen today, because that problem that might be presented is, hey, maybe we should look at this thing differently because it doesn't fit, or it might turn off part of the fan base. Now it's looked at as, oh, you're just saying that because the director's a female, or you're just saying that because you think that one of the other staff members or the writers that wrote this is outside of your purview of sexuality or sex or sexual orientation. So there's this filter that's on everything where people are afraid to speak up, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Where like if you're trying to run a business and people see potential problems and they're afraid to speak up because they're afraid it's going to be taken the wrong way, then it kind of just destroys the whole business, Yeah. And that to me is the change that happened from the time where I started in the first 10 years that I worked there. And then the last few years that I worked there, I seen the company go from an open door, policy where everybody was hired and promoted based on merit and hard work. I seen the company go from being filled with people that were just Disney fanatics and would just jump through hoops and work 80-hour weeks to get things done. It was always about the guest, the guest experience, the viewer's experience. And now it's not that. It's not that at all. People are hired mostly based on cronyism. They're promoted if all the boxes are checked. And like I said before, I think that this causes a big brain drain at the company, and it doesn't help, with the production of anything.
So just to clear it up for the audience, for our viewers, cronyism is, my understanding is when a person in power hires a friend, very similar to nepotism, how you hire or promote your family. So that was your experience seeing that in the late stages of your career, is what you're telling us.
Absolutely. We would see, it was just mind-boggling. We would see people brought in from, one good example I can give you, there was a VP for infrastructure that was brought in from NBC Universal. And within 6 months, he brought over 5 or 6 people from NBC Universal. So every position that came open from that point after he had his position was filled by his friends. There's no other way to say it. And so you can imagine what kind of environment that sets up. And you can imagine what that does to the business, because at the end of the day, guys, this is a business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we lose track of that. We think about, we think of it as an entertainment company or whatever, but it has to make money, and it's not making money. And it's not, and it, to me, and I know I'm not not a creative, as they say at Disney. I'm just a technical guy, but I'm a business guy. I've been very successful at business since I left Disney. And to me, you have a product, you know what your customers are, you know what your customers want, you make a product for your customers. And if you want to do some side project to try to bring on another category of customer, you do that as well.
Yeah.
But don't try to join them together, or what Lucasfilm has been doing, which is even worse, is they've been trying to eliminate a percentage of their audience. And I consider myself as part of that group that they're trying, to eliminate. I said this to Nick the other day. Imagine you owned a pizza shop and you're doing well, you're doing great, for decades, you're the best selling pizza shop in town. And then you decide one day, we're not gonna sell pepperoni anymore.
Yeah.
We're gonna take pepperoni off the pizza, and you can imagine what that would do to your numbers. Like you all of a sudden your sales are going to be cut in half. Now, a normal business person would go, well, maybe some of our customers, they don't want pepperoni, so why don't we offer a pizza that doesn't have pepperoni on it? But let's not stop making the pepperoni pizza.
Right.
And I think that's where Lucasfilm has kind of fell down a little bit. They maybe they're trying to please everybody and they don't know how to do that, or maybe they just don't give a shit about legacy Star Wars fans. And
you working there, and I know you're giving us your opinion as far as Star Wars is concerned, because you work for Disney. You never worked directly for Lucasfilm.
Nope.
But I got to tell you, as a lifelong fan of Star Wars, and I won't speak for Nick, but I know he agrees. I feel like, one, because I'm critical of the product that they're giving us, they see me and fans like me as the enemy. And because I'm critical of the story that they produce, the product that they create, on the front end now, they're calling us racist, bigots, misogynist, and everything else you could imagine. And I feel like a lot of media are backing them up. And it makes me wonder, one, what type of relationship Disney has with media. I mean, I feel like I know what type of relationship they have and authority they have with media, but it's just a really polarizing time in Star Wars. It probably doesn't surprise you that many of the fans feel that way.
Yeah, I can tell you, I know people in the media group, and because we used to support them as well. And it's about access. If you are, if you're writing an article for the Hollywood Reporter and you're critical of a movie or God forbid the executives at some studio, guess what? You can forget about ever getting a story from them again.
Hey, Nick, who is that John Campea fella again?
Yeah. Yeah. He had all the access. He was at red carpets, all that. And then he was criticizing Kathleen Kennedy, a lot of Disney's decision making at the parks, with the movies and TV shows. And man, I'll tell you what, I don't ever see him at those events anymore. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, he probably definitely got blackballed. I mean, and that's unfortunate, because the media, whether you're talking about entertainment or politics or anything like that, journalists, in my opinion, I'm talking way outside of my wheelhouse here, but journalists should focus on the truth and the story.
Mm-hmm.
And if they get blackballed, then they get blackballed, because if all journalists did that, guys, then Disney would never be able to get any stories out, because they blackballed all the journalists.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It should, and it used to be, the shoe should be on the other foot. Disney should be worried about the Hollywood Reporter no longer writing stories about them. It shouldn't be the Hollywood Reporter worried about getting access to Disney.
Yeah.
That is, in my opinion, again, that's what I think is a lot of that. And then there's the fear. And I talked about it a little bit a while ago. people that I know that still work there, they're scared to death. And I think that, because they have kids, they have families, they're trying to pay for their mortgages, they're trying to save up for their kids' colleges, and they keep their head down, they walk around on eggshells, and this is the same when it comes to the media reporting on Disney. It's the same. These people have jobs and they don't want to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it's the world that we live in.
So, Kallus, with all the news going on with the James O'Keefe Disney tapes coming out, with what's being said about their hiring practices and all that sort of stuff, and what happened to you and what was told to you, have you heard that from anybody else? And is that something that you see, outside of yourself happening there at the company? And what was it like once you left the company? And kind of what you went through once you left Disney.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to recap that, right? So I had my eyes opened a little bit by my previous boss, and then that day, they were just jammed wide open, right? So I left there thinking, oh my God, I'm going to sue the shit out of these people. You can't let people go that have a great performance history, that's been working at the company for almost 18 years because they're a guy and they're white. That's just not right. So I immediately contacted an attorney. I think it was like days later. And the first attorney I talked to on the phone, he told me, he's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but if you didn't record that phone call, and even if you did record the phone call, it's against the law in the state of California, and Disney's going to insist that you be charged. It's a misdemeanor charge with 30 days in jail and a $10,000 fine. And he said, and if you lose, he said, if you're lucky and you lose early in the case, Disney will only charge you like $50,000 or $100,000 legal services. But if you take it all the way if it makes it to be in front of a judge or in front of a jury and you lose, you're talking about $500,000 worth of legal services, Disney, and they're going to make you pay it. They're going to garnish your wages. They're going to come after your house. They're going to, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of shut me up for a little while. And then I have a friend who's an attorney that I might have mentioned to you before. And I talked to her, and she connected me with another attorney. And that attorney actually went to her office, and she just immediately told me, she said, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but in the eyes of the law, especially in California, you can't discriminate against white people. So she said, you're going to hit a roadblock on this, and you're going up against one of the biggest legal teams in the world. And I knew that because we also supported Disney Legal, and I knew they had, 200-300 attorneys. And even though they only pay them like $150,000 a year, when they have to bill somebody back for legal services, they bill at like $5,000 an hour. And they do that on purpose, because if you go up against them and you lose, they're going to bankrupt you. So I decided that, there was nothing I could do about it. And also I had a pension, this would be a good time for me to talk about, what I owe everything. The house that I'm talking to you from now, like, my retirement, I had a pension there at Disney. That's all Disney. I owe Disney for all of it. I'm not here to say that, it's just was the worst experience of my life. I'm here talking about what happened to me at the end, and the reason why I think the company is suffering now. It's not about me personally, but after that, I went through some really bad depression. To be honest with you, I lost two, and it's hard for me to talk about it now. I lost 2.5 years of my life. And that 2.5 years, just when I started getting better, COVID came around, and it just kind of, pounded even more. I had to go see a psychiatrist and a psychologist. I had to go on medication for depression for the first time in my life. Something that I always tell people when I'm telling this story, after talking to the psychiatrist 2 or 3 sessions, she stopped me one day and she said, "You realize you have Stockholm syndrome, right?" And I had no idea what that was. I asked her to explain it to me. And it's when you've been captive by someone and you fall in love with them. Like you've been abused by somebody for years and years and years, but you can't say anything bad about them because you have such reverence for them. And when she told me that, I was like, you're right. Like I really struggle to say anything bad about the Walt Disney Company because I had this emotional attachment to them from early childhood up into, my entire time of working there. So, I saw the video, the James O'Keefe video, and the other one that came out the other day. I saw the comments from the gentleman from Lucasfilm. I agree with all that. I do feel a little, there's a little sympathy in my mind for the guys that got caught on tape, going out on a date with a woman. But I just want to say here, I believe that every word of what they said was true. I mean, I know that they were just saying it to make conversations with these women, and they were probably being a little bit braggadocious, but absolutely true. I mean, that man knows. Well, first of all, I don't think he's employed at Disney anymore. He's probably by now definitely on a leave of absence and probably been secretly, carted off to sign a bunch of paperwork and given a fat paycheck so that, he won't say any of that stuff in court. Right. That's my opinion. I don't know any of that as a fact. I've been disconnected from Disney since 2016. But all of that stuff has happened. It's real. You can't correct. This is me again, my opinion. You can't correct bigotry and discrimination with more bigotry and discrimination. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. And I know that there's a large percentage of people out there in the world that believe what that attorney told me, that white people cannot be discriminated against. And that especially if you're, in the world that we live in, if you're a white male, you're supposed to just take it. You're supposed to just put your tail between your legs and go and just, it's so easy for you apparently just to move on with your life and get a new job and do whatever. But it's not. It's not. It hurts my feelings, and it hurt my feelings, and it put me into depression just as much as it would have if I had been a black person or a woman, And I'm going to say something to you guys now that might shock you, but I'm gay. And I have been gay, and I've known that I was gay since I was a teenager. I never once, ever allowed my personal life to come into my professional work life. Mm-hmm. No one at Disney, and even to this day, until this stream that we're doing right now, no one at Disney knows that I worked with, knows that I was gay, because I am a very private person, and I don't believe I don't have any negative feelings towards people that do have that pride and wear their sexuality on their sleeve, and it becomes this huge part of their life. But to me, the way I was raised is that what you do in your love life and your home relationship and your family and your sexuality, that's all something that is private. It's not something you bring into the office. Yeah. And the reason I bring it up in this context is I feel like if those people had known that I was gay, I don't think they would have put me on that list because there was a gay gentleman who was on my team.
Did you consider telling them?
No. And I've thought about that a lot over the years.
Well, that would be a piss poor reason to keep you on. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah. I wouldn't want to. And I'll say this to a lot of people who've been hired at Disney recently because of what they are instead of who they are and what they bring to the company. I couldn't work in that environment. If I got up every morning and I thought to myself, oh, I got this job because some white male got laid off. If I knew that, I couldn't go to work at that job. I just couldn't do it. And the same way, and just interplace that with any race or sex or sexuality, I wouldn't want my prosperity put on the shoulders of somebody else just because of what they are.
Right.
And I think that if they had known, they probably would have. And in fact, what I was going to say is there was a person in our department that was open and out, and he still works there. And he's a white male. So, I mean, just take that information with, how you want it.
You mentioned check boxes earlier. So there's an example of it right there.
And if you guys remember, Film Threat released the Disney letters where they were they got copies of the forms and the letters from Disney with the check boxes and stuff on it.
And it was like a point system.
Yeah.
I saw that. And then on the entertainment side, the way they hire and audition talent now. You have to, before you can even get to the audition, you have to fit all of these filters. And don't get me wrong, guys, we're fooling ourselves if you think there hasn't always been filters for the entertainers. Because when a role is written, the writers have an idea what this person looks like, how they sound, how they walk, their mannerisms, whether it's a male or a female. But
Disney's coming to get us. Y'all hear that?
There's a difference I think there's a big difference in trying to bring something from the page that's written to life than trying to bring life and put it on the page. So in other words, if you're designing a car and you design the entire car and then you think, oh, well, now we have to make the engine fit in the car. That's not how you do it. And I think that's kind of what the entertainment industry as a whole has kind of started doing. It's like, okay, we want to tell this story. We don't know what the story is yet, but we know for sure that we want it to be about this race, this sex, this sexuality. And then they go and they try to backfill a story behind that. And historically, that's not the way it was done. You would have a great story that comes from a book or a novel or just a great screenplay. And then the showrunner or the director or whatever would say, well, I think that this character is a black male in his 50s, and they would put out the call, and every black male that could play a role in their 50s in Hollywood would send in their tape.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not the way it's happening today.
So with you saying all that, I think it's the perfect time just to say, let you speak on as a fan and former employee. Leslie Headland, the Acolyte, the latest Star Wars show, it has been said that the Acolyte is the gayest Star Wars ever made. That was said in an interview by The Wrap to Leslie Headland. She loved that and thought that was really funny. But the problems with the show isn't just all of that, but I also got to say, she's proud of what she's created and it being called what I just said. But at the same time, she was also proud to hire a writing team that had no expertise in Star Wars. So here we are with a franchise creating a product and they have no expertise in that field. So we're watching Star Wars that doesn't feel like Star Wars. That's the major problem with most fans as they watch this show. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? What is the deal with what they're doing?
This is way out of my wheelhouse, but it's just common sense, right? If you're gonna make a movie about World War II, you're probably gonna go interview a whole bunch of World War II vets. I remember seeing a video where Steven Spielberg spent 2 years interviewing World War II vets before he made Band of Brothers. Mm-hmm. You're gonna bring in a whole bunch of people who have shot that kind of film before, and then you're gonna make the film. And it just seems like even over on the Marvel side, right? Like, how many stories have you read where it's like, that none of these writers ever read the comic books, Say, okay, and you're like, okay. You don't have to read the comic books, but what kind of research did you do to write this? And a lot of times what you'll get back or what you'll read in the interviews is, I watched a couple of the anime movies. It just didn't seem important to know. And it comes out in the quality of the work, right? Because people get turned off about that. I was going to say, Coach, of course, because it's part of my group, right? I lived in LA for 20 years. I know a lot of gay people, and we chat, we talk. I was just down there a week or so ago for Gay Pride. I don't know a single one of us, or none of us, like the Acolyte. None of us. It's not.
That's funny.
So if her intention was to get gay people to like Star Wars, it's not working.
Well, I think the only appropriate response is hell yeah.
It's like what I can say from my own personal opinion. If I'm watching a movie or TV show or something and there's a gay character, either if it's one of the main characters or the peripheral character, I get annoyed if it becomes the main part of the story. Just like if I'm watching a heterosexual story and it's all heterosexual and the story turns into all kind of sexual, like I can't watch those movies about the that was made about the books.
50 Shades of Grey?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
50 Shades of Grey.
Because it's like, to me, it's just too much. It's too much of what's going on in the back room. There's no intrigue. There's no, I like things that make my brain work. Make my brain think, what is going on here? How is this going to turn out? And a lot of the Star Wars now, don't you think is very predictable? Like,
very.
By the time you watch the first 15 minutes of an episode, you kind of know what's going to happen. And that to me is something that, but to answer, to close that off, I think there's like a circle of people who have convinced themselves that this is what the majority of Americans want, whether they know it or not. And they're going to keep putting it out there as long as they can. And it's probably a good thing that they can't do it much longer because they have to make money. I can tell you one of the things, again, this is probably more Stockholm syndrome, but I still own all the stock that I always had from Disney. But you know what's annoying as hell? Disney stock was around $100 when I left the company in 2016.
And it is.
What do you think it is today?
The same.
If I had taken that stock and just moved it over to Tesla, I'd be at least $1 million richer.
Now, at one point, it reached like 230. Between them.
And it's never split either. They've never done a split or anything. It would, it'd be one thing if we were talking about it still at $100 and they did a 20-for-1 split, 2 years ago. But no, it's still, they don't do a dividend. So at some point, I'm just going to have to give up on it and just sell it. Or they
put it into something that'll actually make you money.
Exactly. Because if they start making money, I think the stock will take off. Everything's in place for them to just be this mega corporation because they own everything. But they just need to, even if they have to do it quietly so they don't piss off that little percentage of people, they just need to start making what people want to see.
The irony in everything that you're saying, in your own personal experience with what happened with O'Keefe Media, with this anti-white male movement, and it's like you see that in the stories. You see that in Star Wars especially. There aren't any white male protagonists. The only two that we've gotten since Disney bought the company is Solo and who's the other one, Nick? Because Andor's not Caucasian.
No. Kenobi. Ewan McGregor. And
two legacy characters.
Yeah, two legacy characters.
Yeah. So there is certainly an anti-white male movement happening in the Star Wars franchise. And it's sickening. It shouldn't be about that. And I'm not anti Star Wars because they don't have a little Southerner like me, as the lead. I don't care about that. That doesn't mean anything to me. But I also don't want to be preached to. And, I just, the craziest thing is like Kathleen Kennedy is even on record saying Star Wars is a white male dominated franchise.
Yep.
So if she were going to pander to a demographic, if it's a business and she likes money, what are we doing?
What you got to understand, though, Coach, is those people are going to get their money regardless. Kathleen Kennedy's already filthy rich.
Oh yeah.
If she got fired tomorrow, she'd never go. She'd never go without food.
Yeah,
like people don't realize these people make millions of dollars a year in bonuses. Not to mention her salary is probably $500,000 or $1 million a year. And this is the problem, right? Like you would think at some point, and I think we almost seen it with the vote, with the Disney board this past year, where Michael Eisner almost lost his job. But you'd think at some point somebody would go, and that's why I think sometimes what is going on with Kathleen Kennedy. And it's another, by the way, I don't mean to keep rambling here, but it's another situation where someone comes into the company that wasn't there before. Kathleen Kennedy had nothing to do with Disney. She had nothing to do with Star Wars or Lucasfilm. She somehow she got this position, and it's what I was describing to you guys earlier, where we would have people in my division come over from Microsoft, and it's like, so you've been working at Microsoft for 10 years, on the software advancement team. How does that make you qualified to come over and be director of network infrastructure at the Walt Disney Company, right? Yeah. But it was because someone knew somebody, some friends, some strings were pulled, and then I think this is what happened with Kathleen Kennedy, and then it turned into, we can't fire or reprimand her because she's a female, and she's the first female of a major film studio. So we don't want to be known as the people that, and it's what I was telling you guys earlier, where people are afraid to speak up because their criticisms won't be heard. All that will be heard is, that's a man talking about a woman doing a bad job. And they need to move away from that shit before, because if they don't do it soon, they're going to have to sell Lucasfilm.
Oh, I hope so.
Wouldn't it be weird if Elon Musk come along and said, "Okay, I'll give you $1 billion"?
I'd be all for it.
Yeah, same.
Anybody, sell it to anybody. Yeah.
But they're going to. I'm just being honest with you. The way things look, and you go look at their financials, they're going to have to start selling shit soon if they don't start making money, because across the board, hardly any of the divisions are making any money, and the ones that are making money it's all legacy stuff.
Yes.
It's the theme parks. It's the old media stuff. And again, this is out of my wheelhouse, and I'm just tucking up my butt here. But yeah, if I was Bob Iger, what would I do? Well, I might just quit. Just get out of the way. But if I wasn't going to do that, I would definitely remove her from Lucasfilm tomorrow and bring in someone that's been there at Lucasfilm for 10, 15, 20 years. You don't have to worry about them having to know how to run the business or anything like that, right? You just need someone that loves Star Wars and wants to make what George would have made. And the rest of it will take care of itself.
Yeah.
All right, so the reason that I wanted to do this is because I feel like Disney may have lost its way a little bit. I don't think it's something that they can't turn around. And I feel like there's a lot of people still over there, people that I hired, people that I helped get hired, people that love the company and they want the company to be a success. And if enough of us speak up about this kind of thing, maybe some changes will happen, and maybe there'll be some good come out of this. I've moved on. I've gotten better. I have a whole new life that has nothing to do with the Walt Disney Company, and I held off for what's been almost 8 years. I held off not saying anything, primarily because who's going to listen to me? I don't have any kind of platform or anything like that, but at the end of the day, I want the Walt Disney Company to succeed. I want to be a paying customer to go and see good content, and I want it to be something that I can be proud of again. Because, for my entire career working there, when people would ask me, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" I was so proud to say that, "Oh, I work for the Walt Disney Company in technology." And I have to tell you, I don't do that. I just don't. I don't mention it. I just say I work in technology, or I do computer forensics, whatever it is. But I would, I think that this would be good for the company, good for the existing employees, good for future employees. If all this just came out and people would talk about this in a logical way and remove all the politics from it and all the identity stuff from it, and just talk about the entertainment itself and the business itself. And that's why I did this.
And getting the right people there, not just because they have meet a certain checkbox, but getting the right qualified people there that bring something to the table, bring something to the business that's going to actually literally make it better there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well said, brother. Agent Kallus, thank you so much for the interview, and we really look forward to your return to Echo Base Network.
Yep. So, guys, we are going to be bringing Agent Kallus back in a live stream in the future. We will be announcing that when we get everything planned and ready. So stay tuned for that. He will be here going into more details, answer more questions from you guys, and we'll be able to talk about this some more then. So stay tuned for that.